Hello everybody and welcome back to the Oxbridge Formula as we're bringing you the ultimate guide to studying the whole variety of STEM subjects and economics at Cambridge and at Oxford. And today we're delighted to have Jamie joining us, giving you a
Hello.
first-hand insight into the real experiences of a maths and statistics degree at Oxford. So hi Jamie, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get to know you. So at what college did you study maths and stats, and how long was it?
So I've just finished my third year studying maths and stats at Balliol. I've enjoyed it a lot so far, that much that I'm continuing for another year, thankfully. So it can't have been that bad. Yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot, definitely learned a lot. It's kind of weird looking back, how little I knew back then, how much I've learned. But yeah, I've enjoyed it so much.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I'm glad to hear it's a positive experience. So what was it that made you want to do your fourth year and graduate with an integrated master's?
Um, Partially because I was thinking, oh, I've learned a lot of maths, like that's definitely true, but I don't think I'm done with learning maths. Like there's still some maths that I want to learn. So partially just being a bit of a nerd about my subjects and really loving it. Um, Also, not having definite future plans played a little part of it as well. Still being up in the air about what I want my career to be, or whether I maybe want to do further study after that. But I'm pretty sure I'll get a lot of those decisions made by the end of this year. But yeah, mainly because there was definitely a lot of maths I still wanted to know.
Oh, that's so cool. And do you think that having how important is it to have that kind of nerdy kind of interest for your subject if you're going to study at this level?
I think people can get their motivations from different places. I think if you have it, it's an extremely useful tool, and it makes getting up to go to lectures or spending hours on a problem sheet a lot easier. Um, some people have their different motivations. Some people do it so they can get out and have a job, and that's what motivates them, and that works for them as well. But if you have that, it's really, really useful, I would say.
And personally, what is it that you kind of rely on to spark your interest?
Um, just finding it interesting. I'm unsure. No, I think I really enjoy having a problem sheet and doing a question, and like even when it takes you a few hours and you're really not sure what to do with it at first, then finally you get to the answer and you think, oh, I'm so glad I thought of that. Like, and you feel smart, and it's just that like reward having done something that was quite hard. It's quite a nice payoff.
Yeah, so it's quite satisfying.
Yeah, and as well, like when you get to the end of the year and you spend hours and hours and hours and days, like on all these different options, and by the time you get to taking your exams, you have quite a good understanding, quite a deep knowledge about that like particular area, and I think that's quite rewarding as well. Thinking I've put all this effort in, and now I'm actually quite good at this thing. So I quite enjoy that as well.
Oh, and I'm glad you get that end result. That's really good to hear. So, I mean, how long you say about the problem sheets, and I know that kind of takes up that's the main kind of form of homework that you get for your tutorials at Oxford. Um, what's the longest you think you've ever spent on a problem sheet?
The longest. Well, I would like to say first that not all problem sheets are created equally. Like, yeah, some are just a couple of quick questions testing your understanding, and some of them are quite a deeper dive. And also, I'd like to say some problem sheets are not a problem sheet; they're many sheets of paper as well. So I think I've probably the longest is maybe like 3 full days, which is not a ridiculous amount of time, but it was probably I had a few sides of questions to think about. And probably something I enjoyed too, to just spending 3 full days on it. But it didn't feel excessive at the time. But given saying that as well, there's definitely a couple that I've had done in an hour or two because they were just little short ones. And different options give different numbers of sheets, which makes them different lengths. So yeah, the takeaway lesson is that not all problem sheets are made equally.
As George Orwell once said, I'm sure. But yeah, I guess it's what you sign up for, isn't it? And I'm glad that it's like a labor of love, so to speak. But can you remember like the really short one and then the really long one. What topics were those?
So I think in my first year, a lot of them were.
For more information on Oxbridge colleges, subjects, and to get help with the application process, visit oxbridgeformula.co.uk. Click subscribe and ring the notification icon to be notified when we release new content.
Considerably shorter because in each subject that we were studying, we were given one a week, for each module. So they were like single sheets, but then when you get into your second and your third year, you're given one every 2 weeks, so they're covering double the material. So in theory, you have double the questions. But then even in second and third years, not all the subjects stick to that rule. And yeah, there was some that, I think there was one of my shortest ones was like the numerical solutions of differential equations in my third year. And the first sheet was just like a couple of quick questions testing stuff from the previous year. So like that one was done in like maybe an hour or two. Then some of my longest ones have been, I'd say like my analysis or functional analysis sheets. Like in first year there was and even in like my third year now, there's some of the analysis sheets have been like 3 pages long, and it's not like a quick subject usually. So those are probably the longer ones.
Yeah, and was that what you expected?
Like when I was taking the courses or before I came to uni?
I mean, I guess like once you kind of knew the course outline, whenever that was.
Yeah, I guess because it's quite good in the maths department has a lot of resources online where you can see the archived courses that were taught in previous years. So in the holidays before all of my courses, I always look on the archived pages that give the lecture notes and other problem sheets that we used the year before, because provided it's the same lecturer, which it usually is, they use a lot of the same resources, so the same problem sheets and the same lecture notes. So it's useful to, check those out if you want an idea of what you're going to be studying before you commit to the options. But it's also useful to get ahead before you get to term time as well, because it really does take a lot of the pressure off if you've been given the chance to at least read over the lecture notes or to think about a few of the simpler questions before you actually get to term. So yeah, I had a pretty good idea.
Sounds like tried and tested, kind of, if they're taking a similar approach and just kind of tweaking it every year.
Yeah, it's very useful that way. And I think it's good because the past papers are also very similar and useful for revision as well.
Yeah, good to know. Okay, anyone watching, I hope you're taking note of that. So thinking about kind of then, I guess, preparing before you came here. So like between doing your A-levels and then when you sit down and you get given your first sheet or you have your first tutorial, is there anything, what do you wish you did kind of differently preparing for that?
I wish I'd done like more research into what I would be learning, because I think when I applied to come to do maths at uni, and even when I turned up to do maths at uni, I think I thought it would be a lot like A-level but harder. And then when I turned up, I was in quite a shock that it wasn't like A-level at all in some places. In particular, there's like 2 branches of maths, like pure maths and applied maths. And a lot of the applied maths was quite similar to what I'd seen before, but the pure maths was a completely different type of thing that I'd never done before. And so I really wish that I had looked more into pure maths and studied, more proofs or that style of maths, because when I turned up to lectures and they were throwing theorems at me at 100 miles an hour, I just really struggled to keep up. And then even when I was like trying to prove things in my problem sheets, like I had no idea how to set out that sort of thing. And by all means, it wasn't necessary at all. Like I did turn up without that knowledge, and I soon sunk in. Like I soon got to know it, and the tutors are very good at recognizing that people have had different levels of exposition to this material. But it definitely would have put me on a better footing starting out.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone there. I think a lot of people when starting maths, the purer side of things like groups and proofs kind of do throw you off a little bit. Do you remember, did they present anything like that to you at interviews?
Yeah, I remember at interviews being quite shocked by the variety of questions that I got asked, because there was some questions that were very probability and statistics things, and what they do say is they always say that the questions that they present will not require any more than any A-level knowledge that you currently have, which I found to be true entirely. But there was also some other questions on like drawing graphs, which I was expecting, but then also some material from the first year of the pure maths courses. But I had an interview at Trinity College, and they presented to me a theorem called the intermediate value theorem, which now that I've done 3 years of maths is quite a simple theorem that I know how to use. But at the time it was completely new, and I'd never done anything within this area of maths called analysis before. And they got me to read the statement of the theorem and said, how might we apply this to this problem? And then I had to think about that. And then once I'd done that, I said, now given this, can you use this theorem again for this other thing? Which is really kind of how maths works at uni as well. So it was a really good test of, can you pick up this abstract concept that you've never seen before and apply it in this new scenario? So yeah, it was definitely useful to see that.
Wow, and also that's interesting that what you described, and you had an interview at Trinity, but you're at Balliol now. Is that standard? How did it work?
Yeah, I think at least in my year, and I'm quite sure that it hasn't changed because I helped out with interviews last year. Everyone that applies to do maths or maths and statistics, and I think the other joint schools as well, has 2 interviews at the college that they applied for or they were assigned, and then 1 guaranteed interview at another college. So I had my 2 at Balliol, and then I had 1 at Trinity College. And then after I'd done all of those, I then got another interview at Trinity College, which was kind of scary at the time because I didn't know what it meant. And I thought, oh, if I get in, I'm surely I'm going to Trinity College now. But then that didn't happen. I got a place at Balliol, thankfully. So yeah, everyone will have an interview at different places. And it's kind of nice because you get to walk around another college as well while you're having your interviews.
Exactly. And you're not going too far, like you are kind of neighbours, aren't you? So
we're next door to each other, so I didn't get lost on the way, thankfully.
Well, that's nice. At least that's one place where you won't get too nervous. Did you have an interview kind of that was your favourite out of those, and if so, why is that?
Yeah, I definitely did. It was one of my Balliol interviews that I thought went the best. No, actually, no. My second one at Trinity, so like my comeback interview was the best one. I think when I went there and I was speaking with the tutors, we just got on really well, and I think because I'd already done 3 at this point, I wasn't that nervous anymore. Like I knew what to expect, and the problem just went really well. Like I think I got most of that problem pretty quickly and kind of finished most of the extension material as well that they had for that problem. So I came out of that interview feeling really good. But by all means, that wasn't my experience for all of them. Like there was one where I felt awful coming out of it, and I was like, "There's no chance I'm getting in." So yeah, I guess advice from that is, having had one bad one, that doesn't mean things are over at all.
And it doesn't mean that your interviewers thought it was bad either. They can be 2 very different things.
Yeah, completely. And I remember coming out of that and trying to ask other people that had the same interview, like, oh, where did you get to? Where did you find it? How hard did you find it? And I just like to say as well, that wasn't useful at all. And you know what I mean? Because other people may have struggled, made them well, and everyone's perceptions of it are so warped. So, while you're there, like in your free time, getting to know people, I think it's good advice just to have fun, make some friends, and not really talk too much about maths.
Good advice there. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you find that people are out there trying to play a very different game to you, and it can be off-putting.
Yeah, and then I remember being in the JCR, so the common room at our college, talking to people, and then people on the next table were talking about all this maths that I'd never heard of, and I was getting really intimidated because I'd never heard of this thing in geometry that they were talking about, and they were talking about how they'd done these Olympiads, and I'd never done any of those things. And at the time I was like, oh god, they're so much smarter than me, I've got no chance against them. But like quite clearly, like I've done pretty well, and I got it in, and doing well now I'm here. So don't get intimidated by other people because it's quite easy to get in that mind space.
Yeah, you just have to focus on your own journey, really. And you say about there was a problem that you were given in your comeback interview, which is really nice to hear, that the one that you really didn't want to get is actually the one that you felt like you did the best in. Can you remember what that problem was that you liked so much? Can you describe it?
The problem that I liked so much was, so that wasn't the one that was like the first year material one at Trinity. That was the other one.
Okay.
It was about having a ladder against a wall. Sorry, my demonstration might not work too well. We had a ladder against a wall, and as it slipped down, like it made some sort of like curve here. And we had, like, if you think about the maximum point, ladder attained at each point. And the question was to try and work out what the equation of that curve might be. And then sketching other similar curves to that, but with different like powers and exponents. But it involved like trying to parameterize this ladder by maybe a time variable as it slipped down, and finding like a maximum point as the parameter varied, which was like quite a new concept, because you were thinking about the XY coordinates of the ladder, but you had to introduce this new parameter in order to get to the XY coordinates.
And you say that that's quite new. How much kind of support or like prompting did you get from the academics?
At the time, so in that interview, I think it clicked quite quickly what to do. So I didn't need too much prompting, but the academics and the interviewers are very good at realizing, oh, they're going to need a prompt now. I was never just sat there for 5 minutes stumped. Like, you know, if it was obvious, like Jamie isn't getting anywhere with this, then they, you know, gave a little hint or something else. And that definitely happened in a lot of my other interviews. And, you know, these people, they go through training for interviews, and they've interviewed hundreds of candidates in the past. Like, they get pretty good at interviewing people. They get pretty good at putting people at ease and getting the best out of you more than anything.
So how much weighting then do you think that has in comparison to your MAT admissions test?
I think the interview probably has a larger rating, but obviously I guess it's up to each individual tutor, because the tutors make the decisions at the end of the day. I think the MAT is a good signpost, but I think tutors are also very aware that candidates have a lot of different levels of preparation for the MAT, based on their schools and their backgrounds, stuff like that. So it's only a small pointer as to how good that student might be. I think once they get to the interviews, they can really see their potential more than anything, rather than how much preparation they've had. And also the tutors, when they do admit you, they've got to teach you for 3 years. Like, they're partially making a decision upon like which students they want to teach for 3 years, and who they think is going to respond well to their teaching style, like who was good in a tutorial sort of situation. Because I think a lot of the reason that Oxford do interviews in maths like they do is because it's designed to be quite like a tutorial. So if students do well in that form of interview, the tutors know that they're going to react well to the teaching that they do, which is important.
And you mentioned how they're trying, to distinguish like the potential from like the training. Mm-hmm. How much support did you get for the admissions from your background?
Yeah, so I got some support, which was really helpful at the time. Well, there was bits that were really helpful and bits that were less helpful. Thankfully, I went to like a huge state sixth form college that had like 1,000 people in my year. So it was expected that at least some of them would be applying to Oxbridge. So we had like a bit of an Oxbridge program, which was nice. And so there was like there was a few talks organised and stuff, but what was maybe less helpful is that the person that was organising the STEM applications, like there was a STEM person and a humanities person, studied biology. So I think when he looked at my personal statement, he was like, oh yes, this is really good. But looking back, I think there was a few things in there that probably just aren't correct. Like, they're probably bad maths, but it kind of got through the system. And then we did like a mock interview with him, and when he doesn't know any maths, like, it wasn't that helpful. But like it was definitely helpful to just talk about maths. And I think the best preparation I actually got was talking through with my friends, because I had a friend that also wanted to apply for maths at Oxford. So we just talked through our applications together, did all of the maths past paper questions together, did mock interviews with each other, and we were just doing it like every lunchtime, like on the weeks leading up. And I think that was really, really helpful, because you've got to get into that mindset and that ability of being able to talk about maths out loud and actually conveying what you're thinking, like, because it's a very different story actually knowing what's going on and saying what's going on. And once you get that skill down, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, it definitely requires practice, especially when it's something that you're really talking about your thoughts out loud. It's something you've really never done before as a mathematician.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time with mathematicians, they get quite frustrated that they have to show their workings out, especially when it's like GCSE and A levels, and they, the workings out are the boring bits in the middle that, like, you only want to give the answer. But when you get to interviews, it's really important to show your workings out, because when you get to like university level maths, every word, every sentence has to be justified. Like, why can you apply that theorem? Why is it okay to assume the set isn't empty? Like, things like that. How can you divide by this if you don't know it is 0? So there's lots of things like that, and you've really got to explain every step of your reasoning. So getting used to doing that is really useful.
Definitely. And I'm glad to hear that even though you didn't have somebody to really show you the way for like maths, if they did biology and things like that, that wasn't a hindrance to you. So it must be quite hard sometimes, I think, for STEM students writing personal statements, because a lot of the time you're hearing like, oh, some people don't even look at it, and that can be quite, it's not very motivating, is it? So how did you go about writing your personal statement?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say one thing. I mean, I spoke to my tutor once, and she said she reads every personal statement from top to bottom. So at least at Balliol, that isn't true. But how I went about it, I remember I was quite conflicted as to what subject I wanted to apply for at the time. I was considering maths or economics at various universities. And I thought, right, the way I'm going to sort this out is I'm going to try and write a personal statement for each one. And when I wrote the maths one, I just had words flowing out the keyboard. Like, I had paragraph to paragraph of things I could talk about, of things of maths I was interested in. And then when I came to economics, I tried to do the same thing, and then it turned out I wasn't that interested in economics. Like, I didn't really have that much that I was able to write. So I think I had a lot of like maths that I was interested in, and a lot of that came from YouTube, actually. And I'm sure a lot of people watching might be in the same position. Channels like NumPy, like By Heart, like 3 Blue 1 Brown. They had lots of interesting concepts, and when I found something really interesting, it was nice to go and maybe find a textbook or a website that explained it in more detail, or things that were similar to it. And I think that's a really good thing to write about in your personal statement as well. Like, if you find something interesting on like a YouTube channel or a blog post, for example, going and researching it further and showing that you have that active interest in maths is really good. So yeah, I found a lot of my inspiration, and then once I'd word vomited all of my personal statement, it was just a case of editing more than anything, I think. But I was just mainly talking about maths that I liked and not much else, which I think is the right attitude to have about it.
Definitely, and I know that that's particularly what they're looking for at Oxbridge. It's about you being kind of suited to your course above anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And how interesting that the personal statement was kind of the deciding factor for you choosing your course, and you're doing it the other way around.
I know, yeah. Well, I think that wasn't like my way really to decide, but I think once I had tried to write a personal statement, it was very obvious which course I should be applying for.
Oh, well, I'm glad you didn't get any further and then realise that, oh no, economics isn't the one.
Me too.
So when you finally kind of did get in, I mean, I assume you must have done quite well at the MAT, because you're here now. So what kind of revision technique do you kind of thank the most for how you did in the test?
Yeah, I think the best revision technique was just doing every past paper. You should take it as seriously as an A-level exam, because in some ways it's just as important as an A-level exam if you're thinking of applying to Oxford, or even other universities. Like, I think Imperial uses it and a few others. Like, it's quite an important exam to really spend at least a few weeks preparing for. So I remember I did every past paper, but at the beginning it wasn't easy at all. Like, the first past paper I was really confused by, because it's quite different to the A-level maths you study, and I didn't really know how to approach it. And looking over the mark schemes and the examiner's reports as well, they have little reports. So just reading all that was really useful. And I remember when there was a question that I couldn't do, before I necessarily looked at the mark scheme, I brought it into college the next day and asked, my friend that was also interested in maths, like, oh, can we think about this question together? Even when I didn't understand something in the mark scheme, I brought it to a teacher and, forced them to explain it to me. So really being proactive as well. Like if you don't understand something, don't settle for that. Like really, try and understand it any way that you can. Like don't, you should be aiming for 100 in any exam you take. It's like obviously not realistic, and I got nowhere near 100, but I think it's a good mental attitude to have.
I mean, I don't know if my course is anything to go off, but I know that now I'm at Oxford, like the pass mark is about like 40 out of 100. So yeah, definitely don't aim for full marks in everything. So, I mean, you did all that preparation. When you actually sat, I know it was like 3 years ago, but when you sat the test, what was like a particular area that came up and kind of stumped you a bit?
God, it was quite long ago now.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure I could tell you. I remember there was a multiple choice part and like a more of a long answer version, a long answer part. And I think I struggled with the multiple choice more than the long answer, which was the opposite way around to what I thought it would be. There was just some quite hard multiple choice questions in my year, I guess. But yeah, I think overall, like it was a hard test. Like it's designed to be hard, but I think I did okay in it at the end, and the revision paid off.
definitely, hard work always does somehow. But that's interesting. Yeah, multiple choice. It's something that you can really overthink as well. I mean, thinking about like the UK Maths Challenge and things like that, it's really not an easy thing actually.
Yeah, and there's definitely some like other ways of thinking about multiple choice that I didn't really know at the time. Like I remember afterwards people saying, "Oh, I got it this way," because you don't have to get the answer; you just have to show that others aren't the answer. There's like other creative ways you can think about multiple choice that I think are important. Taking an exam that's designed to be hard like the math.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that I mean, we've talked about the mat and the interview being kind of more important in your eyes, but for example, Cambridge, I know that their kind of entrance exam process is really, really intense. Did you ever consider doing maths at Cambridge or not?
I mean, I think Oxford was the obvious choice for me pretty soon on. I think I was quite intimidated by the step and having to sit it alongside my exams, which was part of the reason, because I did like more A levels than I had to as well. I did quite a lot, so I had like some ridiculous number of exams, and then I remember looking and the step clashed with the same exams, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. But also I kind of liked that Oxford was a bit more of a city than Cambridge. Like Cambridge seemed a bit too quiet for me. So it was pretty obvious for Oxford for me pretty soon on.
Yeah, and you're quite kind of in the centre of it all where you are. And also, I mean, I'm at Somerville and I live right next door to kind of the maths department and things like that. And yeah, we're right by like a big, busy main road. You do kind of feel like you're, in it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm really interested in now then, after kind of having talked about like the maths prep and everything, why statistics? What particularly grabbed you about statistics?
Yeah, so I actually didn't apply to do maths and statistics. I applied to do maths on its own as a single honour. And the courses are very, very similar. So I mean, at the time, statistics, when I was applying, it didn't seem that interesting to me. Like it wasn't something that grabbed my attention particularly. Like I just thought maths is my thing. And in first year, the courses are the same, so I was still not too much the wiser. But then in second year, the courses started to deviate a bit, and I started enjoying a lot of the probability and statistics options, and I enjoyed a lot of the maths options as well. But I actually only changed my degree course at the beginning of my third year. So like in the first week right at the beginning, I changed from maths to maths and stats. And it was entirely because I wanted to take like 3 or 4 statistics options, and you weren't allowed to take that many if you just did maths. And they were really accommodating of the change because I had all the requisites so far. And the courses are so similar for the first 2 years that it is just so easy to change. And I think almost half of the students that do end up studying maths and stats started out just doing maths. There really are a lot of students that just flip between, because you only really discover, you know, what areas of higher maths that you enjoy when you get here. And, you know, it's perfectly valid to do it that way. And I'm glad I did. Like, there's so many interesting stats options I've taken, and it's forced me to, you know, get acquainted with a lot of programming, which has been quite nice. And, you know, it means it set me up for a potential career in like data science or statistics, which, you know, is always a nice field to go in.
Oh, that's so cool, and how exciting that you've suddenly found that area that you're really interested in the long term. How different do you think your experience would have been this year if you'd have not picked that?
I think it would have been quite similar in the sense that the stats and the maths options are kind of interchangeable. Like, they follow the same structure. It's, you know, it's 16 lectures a term with 4 problem sheets and some classes. Like, they feel very similar. Like, the courses is literally just the material that's being taught and which material you're interested in. One difference is I had to spend a lot of time at the stats department, obviously. So I got to flick between the maths department and the stats department. And sometimes it's nice to go in the stats department because it's a little bit quieter, there's less people there. They've got like a nice little coffee bench and like kitchen area where you can make your own coffee instead of having to pay for it in the maths department. So that was quite nice as well. But overall, it's not that different. What will be different is next year, when I go into my 4th year, I have to do a dissertation. And my dissertation will have to be a stats project rather than a maths project. So I think that's one of the biggest differences in degrees in the end. But as I said as well, if you're at a point where you're considering applying for one or the other, it's really not that important. Most colleges offer both, and every time someone swaps the colleges that I know of, their college has been absolutely fine and accommodating with the swap. And as I said as well, the first year is the same. So, and they interview the candidates within those 2 subjects exactly the same. So if you're really stressing over that decision, it's really not a big decision to make at the current time, because so many people switch anyway.
Yeah, how nice to know that you're not alone and that the colleges are kind of so accommodating of that. I guess that's really reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you say about your dissertation, and that surprised me because that sounds like a bit of writing for a STEM student.
Yeah,
what do you have planned?
I don't have anything planned yet because they only release, so we have to choose a title that is offered by an academic. So we don't get to entirely choose our dissertations. There's like a list of options and we choose from the options. So mine will have to be in statistics. I'm not sure which area of statistics I'm going to go for yet. I think maybe something within machine learning, because that's always a very employable thing to do. To you know, have done like a lot of research into an area of machine learning. Or, you know, there's some, you know, usually some projects on like some Bayes methods, which I find quite interesting. So either way, yeah, I'm going to have to do some writing, which is stressful, and some research as well, which is also quite new for a mathematician, because generally what you're expected to know is given in your lectures and in the lecture notes, and if it's not in the lecture notes, you don't need to know it. But, you know, when you start doing a dissertation, you've got to start looking in books in the library, you know, God forbid, which is, you know, something not a lot of math students do. You've got to really start thinking like, oh, what is going to be useful? What is a useful path of, you know, like research to look into for this? So it's going to be a lot of new skills I'm going to have to develop, definitely. And also writing up in LaTeX. So there's a programming language called LaTeX, which is where a lot of maths is like presented, like in lecture notes and, you know, documents and stuff. So when you write it up, I'm probably going to have to do that in LaTeX as well. So I'm going to have to learn how to do that as well, which is, you know, a whole nother like thing. But I'm excited to do it. I am really excited to do it.
Yeah, LaTeX. I think I read a thing saying it can make maths look pretty.
Yeah, it really does, because I've had to do a couple of projects this year, but they were quite structured. And they told us it was fine to use Microsoft Word, and they have like a little equation tool in Microsoft Word, and it's so fiddly and it didn't look pretty at all. But I just didn't have the time to learn LaTeX. So yeah, I think it is going to be a lot better because it does look so pretty.
Yeah, and now you can have a whole year. Woo! So you said about machine learning and that being quite an employable kind of topic. Is that kind of guiding your kind of decisions? Like, do you enjoy it too, or is employability more important?
I do enjoy it too. I think most people find it very hard. It's quite hard as a area of research because I think it relies on like a lot of different concepts. And I do enjoy it for that reason. And I quite enjoy actually doing it more than reading the material, like getting a data set and really applying the concepts. And that's been a few of the most interesting things I've seen in lectures is when they've done that, revealed structure that you thought, whoa, it's so cool that it's done that. So I do enjoy that. And there's other areas of statistics that I enjoy. I think I'm not entirely sure what my biggest interest will be next year yet, but I've got a lot of time to make that decision.
And what's a particular area, be it maths or stats, that you kind of avoid if you can?
I'm not a big fan of algebra, which like really gets into like the more pure, like the purest side of maths more than anything. And algebra, like if you what a sixth former might think of algebra is very different to what like a university person thinks is algebra, because when you get to uni, algebra is all about like your group theory and your fields and your rings. I don't know that much algebra, as you can tell, but it's it's really pure math. It's not about rearranging equations anymore. It's really about talking about these sets of numbers with operations, and it gets a bit too pure for me. And I do like some areas of pure maths, and there's an area called analysis I'm a really big fan of, but I usually try to stay away from algebra. And I'm also not a big fan of sort of like stock applied mathematics. There's some area of applied mathematics that's a lot about looking at equations or mathematical biology, and that's not my thing. I do like statistics in the sense that that's applied maths, but other areas of applied maths I'm not a big fan of.
That's very interesting. And I'm just thinking, for anybody watching out there, we've talked quite a bit about like pure maths, and groups has come up a lot, but obviously that's something you don't really cover before. Could you like give a really short description of what that is and what it means?
Yeah, so I think in your first year you get exposed to like two of the biggest areas of pure maths, which are algebra and analysis. And in analysis, it's thinking a lot about like convergence and the properties of numbers and continuity of functions, differentiability, building up to integration, and just proving that all of that makes sense and is well defined, and what properties you have with those things. And then in algebra, you start thinking about linear algebra, which is a lot of talking about vector spaces and matrices and vectors and what kind of properties they have. Whether what kind of maps do certain things. And then in your algebra courses, you then go on to look at groups and group theory, which is a group as it's defined, as I remember, is like a set, it's like with certain structure. So it has like a multiplication structure, so you can take two elements and multiply them to each other, and then you still end up with something that's in the group. But also some other properties, I think, like associativity. Like you can look up the definition of a group, but they come up everywhere. And I think with group theory, like a lot of the big applications why it's so natural to study them is because, there's a theorem that says that every finite group is a subgroup of a symmetry group, something like that. Someone might correct me. I've not done it in a while. But it shows that it's quite natural to look at groups as the group of symmetries. So when you take like a shape, for example, like a square, you can like reflect it and rotate it, and it's called the dihedral group, which is all the different like positions it can be in, all the different movements. And that's why it's so natural to think of things like groups, because when you just see the definition at first, it looks like, why on earth would we study these things, like a set with these operations on it? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you get to the end of that first year course, you kind of really start to understand, oh, this is why they're so important.
That's really insightful. Thanks so much. And I smiled when you said, oh, why we study these things, because sadly that's something that mathematicians get quite a lot of the time, is what to use it for and stuff like that. But I guess the statistics side of things, that's something that is quite applicable to the real world.
Yeah, and I think I remember, just going back to something, when I was first applying, and I told my mum I wanted to apply for maybe maths or economics at uni, she was like, what on earth would you use a maths degree for? she's like, definitely apply for economics because that'll get you a job. You know, you'll be a businessman then. And I think my mum was quite misinformed at the time, because obviously now that I've spent 3 years studying maths, you know, I see that there's actually a lot of things you can do with maths as a degree, especially maths from Oxford. And even like, even in the pure maths, there's a lot of things you can do. Like if you do a lot of algebra, then you can go into jobs in cryptography, because that relies so much on algebra and number theory. You know, there's some jobs out there for that. But then when you get into statistics, obviously there's so many jobs out there for that. And, you know, big data and data analysis and data science is a big buzzword nowadays for employers. But also machine learning is only going to grow in the future. So, you know, having a few of those courses under your belt, having the ability to code in a few different languages, you know, it has a lot of applications in the real world. So yeah, I can snap back with that now when someone says, what use is a maths degree?
Yeah, take that. Oh, how awesome that there is an answer to that question of what can you do with a maths degree. That's really great. So, I mean, hearing about all of these topics that you cover and all of this work and the problem sheets that you do you even have a social life?
Yeah, thankfully I do. Sometimes my social life is dictated by my work. I think I tend to have a social life, you know, pretty soon after deadlines pass, and that's when it tends to get more active. But yeah, I do enjoy having quite a bit of a social life. You know, I'm nothing spectacular. You know, just catching up with mates, maybe going to the pub, maybe going for a night out. You know, just chatting more than anything. Obviously a bit different now that we're in lockdown, but yeah, I do manage to get it. And also you get quite a bit of a social life being at the maths department, because there's a lovely like huge hangout area in the maths department called like the mezzanine or something, or the mezzanine, and it's right outside all the lecture theatres, and there's a big cafe there. And loads of people like love to work there. It's like this huge area extended cafe, like that's underground, but it has these like glass ceilings into the real world, and there's loads of light that comes in. And you can sit there working on your problem sheets between going in and out of lectures and chatting to the mathematicians. So you get quite a big social life in the maths department as well.
Who'd have thought? I mean, if I was looking for a social scene, the last place I would have thought of was the maths department. But that sounds really, really inviting.
No, it is, yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's so cool. So I'm glad that you can find time to kind of see friends and stay sane. So I guess one last question that I kind of have for you is what is one thing, or perhaps as a person, that you kind of thank for how far you've come in kind of your journey of doing maths and then stats?
There was definitely some really helpful and inspiring teachers like at my college who, you know, pushed me to apply, because it wasn't something that, you know, I thought I would want to do at first. Like I only really made the decision to apply to Oxford like a few months before the application deadline. Like I know some people think about it since they're 3 years old, and that definitely wasn't me. So I think those people like really, you know, took a real role. And I would encourage anyone else the same. Maybe they want to apply, maybe they don't. It is worth, you know, giving it a shot, definitely, because you never know if it is right for you. Or even going on an open day, because that really convinced me as well when I went on an open day. And I think when on that open day, that's someone else. I remember going to Balliol College, and I had a bit of a short list of colleges I might have been interested in. And I went into our old common room, and there was a load of current students there, just stood there so they could chat to anyone that wanted to chat to them. And there was this guy called Ian, and he did maths at Balliol, and we were chatting for maybe like 15, 20 minutes. And he was just so lovely, and everyone there was like chiming in, like, you know, giving all their anecdotes. And I just felt so at home and welcome there. And that's entirely why I applied to Balliol at the time. So, you know, I'm really glad he was like, you know, this could definitely be the kind of place for you, because I know the college I thought, oh, I don't think I fit in here. So that was quite nice. And then the other one as well is, I remember my first year, there was a real point where I thought, maths isn't for me. Like, I've gone on a real journey with this. I really enjoy it now. But in my first year, there was a time where I'm like, you know, it isn't for me. I'm not really getting a lot of it. I'm finding it really hard. And I went to one of my tutors called Frances, and she's this like huge Oxford academic. She's so important. She's got this like huge fellowship in Oxford. And she had lectured me at 9 a.m. that morning in my analysis course. And then I came to her in her office hour and said, look, I'm not understanding anything, like any help that you can give would be really appreciated, otherwise like I'm not sure the maths degree is for me. And then she said, come back to my office like this evening. It was like 6 or 7 p.m. or something. And then we were there until like 7 or 8 p.m. And she'd lectured me at 9 a.m. this morning. And she was like, I'm not letting you leave until you understand this. And it meant so much to me at the time, because like after that, like I did understand it, and it just took that 1 hour with her. And she was so important. I didn't expect it. I was just this first year of undergraduate. Like, why would she care? But like that was really important as well to me at the time. And I still think about it a lot.
Oh wow, I can't believe it's been such a it hasn't been just a straight kind of ascent.
No, definitely not. And I think it's very okay for it to be like that. A lot of people have, those times where it's really hard, but they get over it usually, and it's, it's very rewarding when you do. The tutors are there for you a lot of the time. Like the tutors really, most of the time, are there and will do whatever they can to help you succeed. Like they're really passionate about teaching all the time, and it's so nice to see.
And I mean, to hear that, there was that point where you found it extremely kind of difficult and I guess a bit demoralizing, kind of, what do you think that was because of the step up mainly?
Yeah, I think it was because of this like new style of pure maths that I didn't really get, and like I'd never done it before, and it seemed like some people around me that had maybe gone to better schools or had read more in advance just hit the ground running, and I hit the ground upside down with my hands behind my back, and it didn't really go that well. So I think trying to step up to that, but also living in a very new environment, like there's so much different about being down here, like culturally, in terms of the people that you talk to, like in terms of the foods you eat, like it's entirely different, and you're like learning to become an adult. And I also arrived when I was 17 because I did skip a year of school, so I came a bit earlier. So I was like really immature, and I didn't really know what was happening. And you're learning all these life lessons at the same time as starting uni, and it's hard at the beginning. But yeah, the tutors were there for you and really helped me get through it.
Well, I'm really glad that you've kind of properly found your feet now and found the subject that is for you on like the stats side of things as well. Doing your 3rd year and going into your 4th now. Congratulations on kind of doing such a good job with that. And a real message of hope to people out there as well, that it's okay, like if you are like overwhelmed. I'm sure everyone gets like that at some point. I did in my own way in 1st year, and also great that you kind of had that initiative to use kind of the lecturers and the staff. That's what they're there for. They're there to help, not to just watch you suffer.
Completely.
So thank you very, very much for joining us today and giving us this amazing insight into a maths and stats degree. And I wish you the best of luck for your final year. And